Oh.
Hi, this is Mike. I was just calling to see if that job that you offered was still available.
Yes. The security guard.
I will take anything.
This place was huge in the 80s with the kids. They shut it down years ago. The owner's just not ready to let it go yet.
I will work and you will sleep.
I understand.
Give me your hand.
All you have to do is keep your eyes on the monitor.
Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's, where fantasy and fun come to life.
Okay. What do they want?
They want to make her like them.
Pappy! Tell me how to stop them.
It's too late.
Pappy, go!
Markiplier here.
A troubled security guard begins working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. While spending his first night on the job, he realizes the late shift at Freddy's won't be as easy to make it through. From the same people who brought you Megan, or Mithrigan as some people like to pronounce it. This has been a long time coming, hasn't it? I mean, Five Nights at Freddy's goes back to like 2014. And it was like the summer of that year. You couldn't go on YouTube without seeing people doing Let's Plays of it, obviously. Markiplier made it popular, and then a bunch of other people came along and started doing Let's Plays of it, back when like horror game Let's Plays were like the big in thing on YouTube. Five Nights at Freddy's originated as a horror game made by Scott Cawthon, who I think mostly did like family-friendly games at that point, so he decided he was going to try one more before throwing in the towel. And lo and behold, it became this huge horror sensation online. And like 2015 is when they did the second game, and then they announced the third game that same year, and then I think the year after that they then did the fourth one, and that was around the time I stopped paying attention, because it just felt like, alright, I thought they were just going to stop after the third game, but now there's a fourth one, and now there's like spin-offs, like there's Sister Location, and I forget when the last one came out. That was either early this year or late last year. I honestly can't tell because I haven't been paying attention to it in forever and a half. But when it came out, it was this new creative thing, and obviously it was one of those things where as soon as it started picking up momentum, a fan base then ensued, and you know, then companies started wising up and were like, hey, let's start making merchandise of this. And you know, every time you go to somewhere like Hot Topic or FYE or one of those kind of like pop culture stores, they were selling nonstop Five Nights at Freddy's t-shirts and hats and plushies and posters. That was back when the games were first getting popular. Obviously, new things have come since then. Some things come and go. Some things seem to be lasting for a longer time than others. But one thing was on everyone's mind. When are they going to make a movie out of this? And ever since then, the movie's just been lingering in production hell. Ever since, like, I want to say the beginning, like probably around like the second or third game. It seems like that was when they were talking about trying to make a movie about it. And, you know, scripts have come and gone. A bunch of cheap imitations have come and gone. Obviously, I've talked about two of them already. We had the Banana Splits movie, which was allegedly an original script for the Freddy's movie that was later reworked into a Banana Splits movie. And Willy's Wonderland, which, come on, that was obviously inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's. Even if you like the movie, that's definitely what they were going for. And that was basically their big selling point. Hey, there's not a Five Nights at Freddy's movie out yet, but you got this one, you got Willy's Wonderland, and we have Nicolas Cage. So time has come and gone. People have been wondering, when are they making a Five Nights at Freddy's movie? Instead of going to Warner Brothers like it was originally supposed to, it landed in the lap of Universal, and of course their go-to horror distribution, Blumhouse. And the movie has come out, and I thought it was about on par with Banana Splits and Willy's Wonderland, if not just a little bit better. I mean, if anything, people who are fans of the games can actually say they've seen an actual legitimate Five Nights at Freddy's movie that's not just a fan film. They finally got their own official FNAF movie that's released in theaters, so that's something. A fair warning to anyone watching this, if you don't want to be spoiled about what happens in the movie, just don't watch this video, because there's going to be lots of spoilers. So like a lot of other people out there, I was wondering, how do you turn this into a movie? Because the first game, pretty basic. It's just a point of view type of game where you're a security guard. You have to stay in this Chuck E. Cheese-like place called Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, and you have to watch these animatronics because they come to life during the night, and it seems like they want to kill you by stuffing you into one of their animatronic suits and crushing your body. And in the following games, they started elaborating more and more. It's like they're not just animatronics that come to life, they're also possessed by the ghosts of children that were killed in the 80s, and there was some guy who was like the puppet master of all this. He's in the Springtrap, the big yellow bunny. He's the one that like pulls the strings. He was the one that originally killed them, or maybe it was the purple guy, or maybe it was the guy on the phone. It's one of those things where, according to some people within the fandom of this, you have to play all the games, you have to read all the comics and all the novels, you have to watch every single Markiplier Let's Play video and every single MatPat Game Theory video, and then you'll have a very concrete, comprehensive know-how of what's going on. Then you can go big brain mode and you know the lore behind Five Nights at Freddy's. Like I said, I only paid attention to like the first 4 games, and then all the spin-offs started coming out, and it's like, okay, it's starting to become a little oversaturated to me. But I will say this, the movie actually did follow mostly the first 4 games. They took elements from each of them while still basically being a standard Five Nights at Freddy's movie that's centered on just the main game and the main plot, while also trying to add some new story elements to follow. I mean, in terms of like some of the running motifs here, all the drawings, that's obviously inspired by all the drawings that you see in the games. So they found a way to incorporate that into the plot. And there's also stuff involving dreams, and I know the third one had hallucination stuff in it, and I could be remembering this wrong, but I think the 4th game also had to deal with dreams, in that, the kid that you're playing as in the 4th game kept seeing weird things that were supposed to be like dreams or hallucinations or something like that. They found a way to work that in as well. As for the main plot, they had to build off of the main character of the security guard, who in the original games was hinted at being named Mike. So that's the main character of this movie, and he's played by Josh Hutcherson. And the one disappointing thing, the only complaint I have is there was never a part where Josh Hutcherson looked at the animatronics and said, "Get me a juice box, biatch."
Give me a juice box, biatch.
Anyway, Josh Hutcherson plays Mike, and Mike is a troubled young man because his brother was kidnapped at a very young age while his family was on a camping trip. And he blames himself for this. He keeps beating himself up. He developed a couple of mental problems, so now he takes medication, and it seems like he has a lot of anger issues because he had a security job for a while at a mall, but then he ended up losing it because he almost beat someone to death because he saw what he thought was a kidnapping when in reality it was the kid's parent. So he lost his job doing that. So now he's at a job recruitment office, and it's here where we come across Matthew Lillard. Shaggy Rogers, the demigod himself, is in the movie. And from the trailer, I was like, okay, is he just going to be a one-shot cameo? Because that's kind of what the first trailer made it look like. But then I saw a few people speculating like, oh no, he's going to be a central player. He might even be the bad guy. So I was kind of like, I didn't even think of that. This will come into play later. As for now, Matthew Lillard, as the job recruitment guy, tells Mike, hey, I can get you one job. It's not great, and the pay's not very good, but I can get you one job. And the job in question is, of course, a security guard job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Now, in the first game, as far as I can remember, the pizzeria was actually still opened. I think as they went on, they started to have the whole plot element that Freddy's is being investigated and that there were murders going on and that it was shut down. Specifically, the third game took place like years after Fazbear's was closed down, and then they had it that it was like a horror attraction now, and there was one singular animatronic that was still around, and that was Springtrap. Again, this comes into play much later. They found a way to bring it all full circle because Mike needs the job, not just because he needs money or anything like that. He needs a job because he needs to prove to the state that he's fully capable of taking care of his little sister. And because because just like him, his little sister is troubled. She has trouble making friends. She just keeps to herself. She does a lot of drawings. She rarely even speaks to him because it seems they don't really have the best relationship. And they have some dialogue, like, sort of midway through the movie where he explains that, like, their mother died and the father couldn't keep up with any of this, so now Mike has to take care of his little sister, Abby. And on top of that, you have stereotypical evil aunt that wants to take care of Abby so that way she can get money from the state. I was like, wow, they actually brought the evil aunt cliche back. Haven't seen some shit like that in a movie since the Tom and Jerry movie. And of course, their evil aunt is just some wicked old bat that smokes cigarettes and she just wants the money. And she actively plots how they can slip up Mike with a couple of her buddies who she promised a piece of the pie to. So that comes into play a little bit later as well. But Mike needs a job. He does get the job because he really wants to prove to the state that he can take care of his sister. So he takes the job. The technology in this movie is really dated. And at first I was like, okay, maybe they're trying to have it take place in the 80s because, you know, obviously the bite of 87, that's a big part of the lore. The second game takes place in the 80s. So I was like, okay, so the technology and the scenery looks very dated. Maybe that was like a kind of subtle way to let people know this is the 80s. But later on, they say, oh yeah, you know, Freddy's, it was popular in the 80s. So it's like, wait, this isn't the 80s? Okay, like, apparently the state they live in is like Twin Peaks meets Gravity Falls because the technology they use is old school. They're still using cassette tapes. They're still using VHS players. All the furniture looks like vintage 80s furniture. Like, I think the only thing that was missing was wood paneling. And they even show like old school, like, Fleischer Brothers era cartoons on the TV, and there's a commercial for Chia Pets. I just couldn't help but think, like, wait, when does this movie take place? Or are they just in some kind of state that's lost to time, apparently? Here's where the dream thing comes in. The dream thing comes in because Mike takes medication, and every time he goes to sleep, he has the same dream every night, where he keeps seeing the scenario play out in his head of the day he lost his brother. His brother was kidnapped and then killed, and he keeps beating himself up because he holds himself responsible for this. So every night he keeps seeing that and trying to make it play out in his head that he can maybe one day change the past and get his brother back. But then, when he starts working at Freddy's, he notices 5 kids keep popping up in his dreams. And the one he ends up talking to the most is this little blonde boy. And this is the thing about the movie. Even though it's based on Five Nights at Freddy's, which was built on jump scares, there's not a lot of jump scares in this movie. Except one of the few times there was in one of the fantasy sequences, because he turns the little blonde boy around when he's talking to him, and then the kid has like some black goo spilling from his mouth and his eyes are like pitch black, and his like pupils are white and rolling back into his head. And I was like, that doesn't look like something out of Five Nights at Freddy's, but okay. Who knows, maybe that was supposed to be some kind of reference to the marionette who doesn't show up in this movie, so maybe that was their way of trying to like reference that ahead of time. As he keeps working there, he's introduced to a cop named Vanessa, and she seems to know a lot about this Freddy's place. She gives him the rundown, she explains who the animatronics are, because on the first night he comes across an old VHS tape that's supposed to explain what's going on and how to, you know, be the night guard and take care of things, but it's an old piece of crap VHS tape that keeps flickering static all throughout and has weird edits, so he just kind of shrugs it off. He takes some medication, goes to sleep. Just like in the games, the first night is usually the easiest night. But then when Vanessa shows up, she explains a little bit more all throughout the movie, and he's the one that explains like his situation with Abby, because she at one point stops by his house. And the reason that Vanessa goes to his place to have this chat is because she goes to him to let him know that there was a break-in at Freddy's while on his watch. Which I was a little confused by that. I was like, he's the night guard. Like, even Lillard says that he's only supposed to stay there from, like, I don't know, 8 at night to 6 in the morning. Didn't say anything about having to watch it during the day. I mean, maybe she didn't know. The point is, she goes to his place, she meets Abby, and then they start having the conversation about, like, what Mike's situation is, and, you know, they start to form a little bit of a connection. Meanwhile, the people who did the break-in are the asshole buddies of the evil aunt, because she goes to them and is like, well, if he's working there, maybe we can ransack the place and then, you know, it makes him look bad and maybe he'll get fired and then we can get the girl. She sends her asshole buddies to, you know, cause havoc at Freddy's, and this is where the animatronics come to life. In this one, they don't just come to life at night. They apparently come to life all the time. And these guys obviously end up getting killed one by one. And there's even one girl who they establish is a friend of Mike's, and then it turns out that she's actually double-crossing him and she's working with the evil aunt too. She ends up getting killed as well. It was at this point where I'm like, you know what? If Freddy's was a real place, they wouldn't even need security. The animatronics can easily kill these people, apparently. It's like, screw having a night security guard. The animatronics defend the place for themselves. Anyway, Mike wants to get in Abby's good graces because they start talking a little bit about what their current situation is, because she finds out, like, the court papers that say that she could possibly end up being in the possession of their evil aunt, and they complain a little bit about her. It was one of the few things I actually laughed at, because the little girl says, like, she's like, I don't like her. She's gross and she smells like cigarettes. It's like, that was pretty funny. So they start forming a bit of a bond, and he has to go and work at Freddy's for the night. And that's when she asks if she can go with him, and she ends up forming a bond with the animatronics. The animatronics seem to like her, and in the visions, it's starting to become a little more clear that the children in the dreams have some ulterior motives, because the blonde kid tells Josh Hutcherson in his dream that they can show him who killed his brother if he gives them something in return. And then, of course, you know where this is going. Because after Mike takes Abby to Freddy's, Vanessa shows up for a little bit. Abby almost gets hurt, and Vanessa says, you gotta make sure you don't bring her back here. This is a dangerous place. She should not be here. Now she's forming a bond with the animatronics, and while that might be good for her because she says that she's making friends now, this is going to be bad in the future, just trust me. But ultimately, in Mike's dreams, he makes a deal with the blonde boy that they'll reveal who killed his brother if he gives them Abby. And since he's just so desperate to change the past, he says yes, which he immediately regrets, but at that point, it's too little too late. I gotta bring this up, because this was another thing I was thinking of all throughout the movie. Every time they show these dream sequences that Mike has, the cinematography kind of reminded me of a Wes Anderson movie. It's like, you'd have these like weird static shots where it's like, it's just the forest, and like the saturation is kind of messed with a little bit. It looked like something out of one of Wes Anderson's movies. It's like, oh no, this isn't a horror movie anymore. It's turning into a quirky little indie comedy. You also get a cameo from Golden Freddy. He shows up in this movie because Abby is being watched by the evil aunt, and surprise, surprise, evil aunt ends up getting killed off screen because it's a PG-13. There's not that much gore. I mean, after all, you gotta remember who the audience for this movie is. So I'm totally fine with. I mean, the original games relied a lot more on jump scares than they relied on excessive violence and gore. The gore was more implied than shown. So, you know, I can kind of accept that. And like I said, considering the audience it's made for, the studios, they're trying to play it safe. It's like, well, kids like Five Nights at Freddy's. So, you know, if it's PG-13, that way kids can see it and adults can see it. It's kind of like what they say in the Fazbear training video. Like, Freddy's is for generations abound. It's for kids and adults alike. Whenever Golden Freddy shows up, one of his eyes is glowing blue. So I just want to say, Sans from Undertale did a fantastic job as Golden Freddy in this film. A++, 5 gold stars, 10 out of 10. Every time he was on screen with his blue eye, I just wanted the Megalovania music to be playing. Golden Freddy kills the evil aunt off screen. They do show her lifeless legs on the ground. There's that. But they take Abby back to Freddy's, and they're going to turn her into an animatronic. And who knows, maybe this is some sequel building. We do see the lifeless animatronic of Circus Baby, so who knows. Vanessa got Mike because while he was dreaming, he was slashed and gashed a bunch by what we can assume are the animatronics, obviously. And it's here where Vanessa reveals who was the one behind the killings of the 4 kids that are now possessing Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. And it turns out that it was Springtrap. Of course, you know, they keep hinting all throughout the movie, it's the yellow bunny, it is the rabbit. But we then get another twist. It turns out that Springtrap was actually her father. And the person inside the Springtrap costume, the same person who killed those 4 kids that are now possessing the animatronics and killed Mike's brother, it was Matthew Lillard the whole time. I know there are some people out there that are probably going to watch this and think, oh yeah, that's kind of like the first Scream movie where Matthew Lillard and that other guy were the killers. My personal headcanon, I like to imagine this is actually an alternate universe story where Shaggy actually killed the Mystery Inc. gang and became evil. Do you think that if this movie was put out by Warner Brothers, they would have eventually done some straight-to-video Scooby-Doo Five Nights at Freddy's movie? I could easily see them doing that if they were still partnered with Warner Brothers and not Universal.
Yeah, fuck, shit.
Where are they all?
Oh, that would have been a great crossover. Scooby at Five Nights. That would have been epic.
Hey, welcome to Five Nights at Freddy's.
Hey,
Turn the fuck off!
Warner Brothers, do it.
Shaggy's like, what? Like,
Okay,
hell
3.
yeah, man, I'm horny. Like, animatronics are fucking stupid, man.
So yes, Lillard is Springtrap and Lillard is the puppet master because he has control over the animatronics. Because the animatronics also seem to follow whatever are in these drawings, and they show very early on one of the drawings is like, you know, oh, they're all friendly with each other, and you know, they all seem to trust the yellow rabbit because they don't seem to know that he was the one responsible for their murders. And they also highlight that he didn't just kill them and their ghosts possessed the animatronics. It's that they were also shoved into them because that's obviously a big part of the series. So now they have to convince the animatronics to turn on him because he was the bastard that originally killed them. So as Mike gets there and saves Abby before she could be turned into Circus Baby, then Lillard shows up. They have him surrounded, but then Vanessa shows up because at first she's like, I can't confront him. I haven't seen my father in so long. But then she shows up, tries to stop him. Lillard stabs her with like a 10-inch Michael Myers style knife. And at first I thought she was going to die, but no, later she's only in a coma. Like I said, more potential sequel bait. But Abby ends up doing a drawing that depicts him as like, you know, the killer. So now all the animatronics turn on him and he ends up getting stuck inside the Springtrap costume because again, just like in the games, they established that the Springtrap costume has a bunch of like spring-locked mechanisms that could potentially get someone stuck inside the suit. So that's why he's like that. So he dies within the suit. He even says, I'll come back. I'll always come back. And then the animatronics just kind of haul him off to do God knows what to him. And then the entire place just kind of shakes and starts to fall apart at the seams, so they all get out of there. Vanessa's put in the hospital. And now it seems that Mike and Abby now have a better relationship because Mike has finally let go of the past and he's finally looking forward to the future, and him and Abby can now live peacefully together. And before the credits roll, you see Lillard twitching around a bunch in the Springtrap costume, and then you see the little blonde boy. And the one thing I guessed before walking into the theater to watch this thing, I was like, there's probably going to be a part in this movie where they play that Living Tombstones Five Nights at Freddy's song, and it plays during the credits. They actually played that YouTube song. They actually played it during the credits. I was like, holy shit, I can't believe I called that. So overall, if you're more into Five Nights at Freddy's, this is definitely going to be more your speed. For someone like me, who used to be interested in it, but then slowly lost interest over time, I thought it was an entertaining movie. I mean, fuck, this isn't even the worst movie I've seen in theaters this year, so it was nowhere near that bad. Like, I've seen movies where it's like, well, that was 2.5 hours I'm never going to get back. I mean, shit, I saw The Meg 2 and Cocaine Bear in theaters. This is nowhere near the worst one. Compared to the other movies that are obviously cashing in on Five Nights at Freddy's, in my reviews for Banana Splits and Willy's Wonderland, I said that I liked them even though I had issues with them. Banana Splits is a movie that I think is really stupid, but that's partially why it's entertaining, because they know it's stupid. I mean, it was made for Sci-Fi Channel, and a lot of those are made with like a wink wink nudge nudge kind of feel to them. So even though it was stupid as hell, it's like I did get some entertainment out of it. And Willy's Wonderland, I mean, there were entertaining parts in it, but it felt more like a Five Nights at Freddy's fan fiction brought to life more than like an actual movie. And they weren't even trying to be subtle with, oh, we're trying to cash in on the FNAF craze before they actually make a FNAF movie. This one, on the other hand, it felt a little more sincere. It felt like they were trying to connect it to the games as much as possible. Some people might think they tried to cram a little too much into that. Because it's interesting, I saw someone shared this to me. On IGN, there's a written review where they said something along the lines of, oh yes, they took the indie horror gaming classic Five Nights at Freddy's and they added too much plot to this movie. And it took me back to a couple months earlier in the year when the Mario movie came out, and all these like professional movie critics were like, oh, this movie didn't have a plot to it. So now they're complaining about it having too much plot. That being said, it's obviously not for everyone, and it did feel like the whole Five Nights at Freddy's thing in the movie did kind of become an afterthought, especially in the first few minutes where it's like, all right, when are we going to get to the pizzeria? Oh, it's shut down in this one versus the first game where it was actually still open. Okay. They didn't really do a whole lot with the animatronics. I mean, there is a scene where they do kill those guys because they were breaking in, so it's like, all right, well, they did get to do some stuff there. It feels more like it's made for people who keep up with the lore than, you know, people who are just going to it like, oh, horror movie about killer animatronics? Well, that's new, because I've never been on the internet or played a PC game before. Far from a masterpiece, but out of all the FNAF-like movies, like compared to Banana Splits and Willy's Wonderland, I probably liked it the best out of them because it did feel like an actual movie. Banana Splits, that was obviously like a Sci-Fi Channel movie, so it felt like kind of a glorified TV film. And Willy's Wonderland, that was made by some like rinky-dink small-time production. This one, it's made by Universal, it's made by Blumhouse, and I'm curious to see if this movie does well financially because, like I've been hinting all throughout, they said they want this to be part one of a trilogy, which is the studio mindset nowadays. Oh, if it does well, we can milk it to at least 3 movies. And then, you know, we could probably make spin-off TV shows, or, you know, we can just make another one because, fuck it, they did it with Friday the 13th, part 4, the final chapter, and then they kept making movies after it anyway. I will put it like this. Out of all 3 movies that had killer bears in them from this year, it was way better than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. My God, was it better than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Before someone points it out, yes, I know they say they're working on the Bambi horror movie and an actual sequel to Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Guess we'll just have to wait and see how that masterpiece turns out. Out of all the movies that I talked about for Blockbusters this month, I don't think I like this one as much as Enter the Florpus. I know that's not really fair. That was a Netflix movie based on a Nickelodeon cartoon. But I had more fun with that one compared to this, but it's way better than The Fog. Hands down, it's way better than that was. That was one of the most pointless horror remakes of all time. So this one just kind of lands slap dab in the middle. Not as good as Invader Zim, but better than the Fog remake. So that does it for Blockbusters this month. Halloween is obviously in a couple of days. As for what to expect next month on Blockbuster Show, we are going to be talking about some foreign knockoff movies and a cheap science fiction movie from the, I forget if it's late 50s or early 60s, somewhere around there. And I even have another movie marathon planned, so that should be fun when we get to that. But anyways, guys, until next time, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Was that the bite of 87?